In this video, we're going to learn about Power Query. Power Query is a very powerful tool that comes with Microsoft Excel, and in this video, we're going to learn how to make use of Power Query. By the way, what can you do with Power Query? There are a couple of things you can do with Power Query. For instance, you can use Power Query to perform data cleaning operation, data preparation, and even data transformation. So we're going to start by loading up our data. So I'm going to go over to the data ribbon. I'm going to click on get external data. So keep in mind that there are a couple of options you can use when fetching your data. You can get your data from databases. This one is from Microsoft Access. We have the web, we have from test or from other sources. Here we have SQL Server, we have analysis services, and so on. So, but for this tutorial, we're going to be getting our data from a CSV file, which is considered to be a text file. So let me click here, and you locate the file that you want to load the data. So I'm going to click on the sales and click import. And I'm going to follow the instruction. I'll check this option because my data has headers, and click next. Then I'm going to choose the delimiters to be comma, and I'm going to click next and click finish. Also, I'm going to click OK. So this is going to load up my data. The next thing I'm going to do is to transform or clean this data using the Power Query. So I'm going to, first of all, let me remove these extra spaces at the top. I'll simply delete it, then select my data. Now I'm going to click on from table. So this is going to load up the Power Query editor. And by my left, you can see the table name, which is sales. And here we have our data. And on the right side, we have query settings and steps. That is the changes we've made on our data. Looking at this data, there are a couple of things we can do with this data. One of the things you can see is inconsistency in formatting. So we're going to be cleaning all these things before we can analyze this data. So first of all, we're going to be starting from the product. If you look at this data, you can see that some of them have white spaces, some are capitalized, some are in lower cases, but the goal is to have them to be in a consistent format. So I'm going to click on this column, then do a right click. I'm going to head over to the transform, then click on trim. This is going to remove all the white spaces. Then next, I'm going to click it again, then right click, then go over to transform. Then I'm going to click on capitalize each word. So this is going to capitalize each starting word in the values. With this, we've cleaned the values in the product column. Then let's look at the order date. We're going to start by converting these values into date. And there are a couple of ways you can do that. You can right click here and click on change type. Here you can choose date, or you can click here and then choose date. So let's go with this option. So now our data is now represented in form of date. Then let's head over to the quantity. And for this quantity, I'm going to change the type to whole numbers. So we'll go for whole numbers. And here we have a couple of errors. And that's probably because the values there are not in numeric form. One of the things we can do is that we can give them a default value. For instance, we can change the errors to a given value, for instance, 0. So I'm going to head over here, then do a right click. I can decide to remove the errors, or I can replace them with a given value. So let's go for replace errors. Here I'm going to choose 0 and then click OK. So it's going to replace all those errors with 0. Then we'll look at the unit prices. So we're going to be changing this to currency. So now they are now properly formatted as prices. Then we'll look at the regions. We're going to start by removing the white spaces. So I'm going to right click here and then go over to transform, then click on trim to remove the white spaces. I'm also going to capitalize each of the words in the region. So I'm going to click here and still on transform, I'm going to click on capitalize each word. Then we're going to look at the customers column. For this particular customers column, we can split these names into first and last names. So I'm going to click here, and I can choose to do the splitting here. Here I can choose delimiter, or I can go to the transform ribbon and then click on split column, and then I'll select by delimiter. So this is going to prompt me to provide my delimiter, and I'm using a space, and I'll click OK. So now we have our data in 3 columns. So we have it in customer 1, customer 2, and customer 3. And if you look around, it seems like only one person has, or 2 persons have third name or middle name. So I can simply remove the entire column. So let's click here, then we can go over to remove, and this is going to remove the column for us. Then next, we're going to rename the headers. This one is going to be first name, and this one will be the last name. So I'm going to click here, and then I'm going to choose rename. For the name, we'll give it first name. Then for this other one, we're going to give it last name. So let's go for rename, and this is going to be last name. Then for the sales rep, we can also start by trimming off the white spaces. So I'm going to right click here and go over to transform, then click on trim to remove the white spaces. Then the next thing I'm going to do is that I'm going to split it. So I'm going to click on split columns by delimiter. We'll click OK. So now we have, this should be for the first name, so I'm going to rename it to first name. And this one, we already have a column with first name. And for the sales rep, maybe we may leave the name as a single name. So what we're going to deal with now is the null. So we can also leave it as null. Then for this other column with an empty first name, we can decide to give it a default value. So wherever there are blank names, we'll give it a default value. So I'm going to right click here and then go over to replace values. And since I'm targeting blank cells, I'm going to provide a default value. So we can just call it maybe no name and click OK. So that becomes the value to be used to replace any blank cell. And with this, I think we're done with our cleaning operation. So when you cross-check your data and you're sure that you are done with this data cleaning and transformation operation, you can go ahead and close the Power Query and load the data into Excel. From there, you can now start performing other operations on your data. So this is our transformed data. From here, you can decide to aggregate the data, group the data, or use pivot tables and pivot charts to create visuals from this data. So this is basically how to use Power Query in Excel to clean, transform, or prepare your data.